my entire life, I've kind of had no chill when it comes to hobbies. Like anything that I do, it's like, it's worth doing 100% or not at all. Like if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this to try to be the absolute best that I can. Training casually doesn't light the same fire. And like last year, I feel like more people were talking about the women's show than the men's show. And like, I think there's finally starting to be some equal interest, but I do think open women are still steps behind the men. You know, men have just more shows.
Time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, our guest is Erin Murray, 3-time world's strongest woman. There's a lot of stuff here. So, and 12-year veteran in strength sports, earned a pro card in the 82 and open divisions, competed in Giants Live and the Arnold, coach at Dungeon Strength RX. Passionate about mental health, We'll get into that. I'm one of the few athletes to compete internationally in 3 weight classes. Did I forget anything in there?
I think that's the highlights.
Yes. So
but I've been doing this for a long time. So.
Yeah, well, 12 years. So We'll get into that. Before we get started, we have a gift for you here.
Oh, cool.
So go ahead and open that up. That book is made from the same supplier that makes our powerlifting belts.
Oh, very cool.
And the coin is a coin that I've given to people over the last handful of years that embody the aim of Elite FTS, to live, learn, and pass on. You know, that's kind of the prerequisite to be on the podcast, and that's something that you do very well. So I want to thank you for that and continue to do that.
Thank you.
And there's element packs and
nice
other stuff in there.
Very cool. This is beautiful. Thank you.
So I want to jump off with how this all started, not the strong woman or strong man or whatever the politically correct phrase is for that, but what got you into training with weights at the beginning?
So forever ago, I did not really grow up an athlete. My dad tried really hard because he really wanted us to be into sports, but like it wasn't really my thing. So I was more like musically, academically inclined. Started my first year of college actually going to study math and French horn performance. So complete 180. My second year of college, I had to drop out for some mental health issues. I'd struggled with my mental health for a really long time, but then my second year of college, developed a pretty significant eating disorder that kind of forced me to drop out and get treatment. And actually went off. I got really lucky. I went to this like camp that was really movement based. It was really about like appreciating your body for what it can do, about like movement empowerment. And we did martial arts as part of that. And so that's kind of what snowballed it. I ended up being kind of like weirdly good at martial arts. I picked up on it really quickly. So I kept training martial arts. When I came home from that, very briefly, I started doing CrossFit to get in better shape for martial arts, and actually ended up really liking that. But I liked the more strength components of CrossFit more than like the running and stuff like that. So that kind of naturally gravitated towards powerlifting. I liked like the squatting and the deadlifting. So I actually powerlifted for a couple of years. At that point, decided to go back to school. So I went back to Central Washington University to study exercise science, thinking I wanted to be a strength coach of some sort. Really loved powerlifting at the time, but I met some buddies in college who I didn't know at the time were like 2 of the best strongman athletes in the world at the time. Zach McCarley and Pat Castelli, they're phenomenal weight class strongmen. And I just happened to become friends with them, and they put on a show as a fundraiser to compete in Norway or something like that. So I jumped in because they're my friends, and I just fell in love with the sport. Never looked back. I think I went back to try to do a powerlifting meet at one point, but I was so hooked on like the variety of strongman that it was kind of hard to go back. And I've been doing strongman exclusively since 2015, I think.
So
quite a long while.
Yeah, going back to the camp, you went there for the mental health, right? And the sport became part of that. So a way to cope with it per se, right? Music wasn't doing that for you?
Not really. I think for me, I needed a couple things. I needed something that was more like physically empowering. And I always enjoyed music. I think I more enjoyed being good at it. I really liked the challenge of like lifting because you have to put in the work for it. And I think that's something that really drew me to lifting in general. It's kind of all growing up like academics and stuff. It kind of came easy. I was really good in school. I was really good at music. I kind of coasted through a lot academically growing up.
One of those people.
And
it wasn't me. Kind of coasted out.
Really?
Coasted out. Yeah, that's right.
And it's so much more rewarding to achieve something that you've worked hard for. And I think that's what I really liked about lifting is that like you have to put in the work and you only get out of it what you put into it. And I kind of just fell in love with that process of like working hard and then like seeing the results of that hard work paying off. And it was just different.
I mean, we'll circle back to that, but do you think that's kind of what was missing from the start that
maybe
kind of played into the mental health?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of things going on there, but I think one of it is I think it's good for people to be challenged. And I think it's easy to get complacent and maybe kind of like depressed and when you're not being challenged enough.
Yeah, that's the right word for it, because how many people are just sitting around on couches doing nothing? But, you know, challenge yourself a little bit, get that workout, you know, and it might lead to more things.
Yeah, but what's interesting is for a lot of people, music is that. But if it's what you always did and it just came so easy, then maybe not so much.
Yeah, it was just part of my life. And I think there were a lot of things looking back that I thought I really loved. And I think really what I loved was being good at them. But I remember I got to college and I tried to kind of, when I went back to college, I tried to revisit music and I was really shit at it. And I found I didn't enjoy it as much. And I was like, oh, did I really enjoy this process or did I enjoy being the best in my class?
Yeah. Well, this is kind of a fucked up question though now because you're really good at this. So are you back to the same place?
I do question that a lot. But I think I wasn't good right away. I think you see a lot of, I don't want to say a lot. I feel like I've been here a long time and I see a lot of athletes kind of have these meteoric rises and then crash. And the people that show up for like a year or two, they do amazing and then they kind of disappear.
Well, most don't last a decade.
And I think part of, I guess it's been a blessing is that I wasn't so great at first. And it took me a long time to build up to it. And I actually remember on the Arnold stage last year, they made some comments about me coming out of nowhere, having this meteoric rise. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've been here since 2015. But there were a lot of years where people didn't know who I was. And I think that was good for me because I had to enjoy the process. Like I didn't just, go to nationals and win my first year. It took me years to get there. I think that was good overall because it meant that I was staying in it because I wanted to do the work and work for it, not because it was easy off the bat.
Yeah. So going back to the first powerlifting meet, how did that go?
Terribly. It didn't go terribly. I mean, I thought they were good numbers at the time. I felt strong. I think I went like 6 for 9 or something because I didn't know what I was doing. And it was fun, but I didn't hit anything crazy. I didn't break any records or it was just
no
fun.
Apprehension on doing it because
that's
really the first roadblock for most people is they'll train. But when it comes time to compete, they won't do it because they don't ever think they're ready.
I don't think I ever really had that. I think part of it was that I didn't really have a frame of reference. I didn't know what really strong women were doing. I wasn't comparing myself really to anyone at the time. I was really green. I didn't know the sport. So I thought I crushed it. Looking back, I was like, that was pretty pathetic. But like at the time I felt cool about it. And I think not having much frame of reference was good for me because I didn't go in thinking like, oh, I have to hit these numbers to be impressive. I just went and did what I could.
That's probably an important step. The amount of people I know that train at the gym, put up amazing numbers and ask, why don't you compete? They're like, I don't know. What if I don't win? I'm like, geez, man, is that the only thing holding you back from even taking the step at trying yourself?
Yeah. Well, what I'm trying to figure out is it the training or the competing, that filled that void? I don't want to say really filled the void because there's, as you said, there's a lot of other aspects that kind of play into all that. But a piece of the void, that's probably a better way to say it. Was it the training or the competing?
Both. I think for a couple reasons. I think part of it was probably not the most healthy, but I needed something else to be obsessed with.
Yeah.
Like, it was like mental health, especially like the disordered eating became like an obsession in my life and I needed something else to obsess over that was more positive. And so for me, the training became that, something to really focus my time on. And then just my entire life, I've kind of had no chill when it comes to hobbies. Like anything that I do, it's like, it's worth doing 100% or not at all. And so for me, the competing was that component of it. It's like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this to try to be the absolute best that I can. So for me, just training casually doesn't light the same fire.
Do you think if you had to, you could just train for health?
Up until, I would say up until the past year, I would say probably not. I think I've done a lot of growth has happened, I think, in the last year, especially like from like a mental health side. I've been doing this for a long time, and it did help with a lot of the symptoms of mental health that I was dealing with. Like, it got me eating again. It got me taking care of myself, like, because those are things I had to do to be good at the sport. I don't think it's really until like the last year or two that I've tackled a lot of the deeper issues head on. So up until the last year or two, I think I would have said no, that if I wasn't competing and training to win, what's the point? At this point in my life, I would hate not getting to compete anymore. But if for whatever reason I couldn't, I think I would still enjoy the gym.
Yeah.
I'm in a better headspace with that.
Okay. It's a like I said, it's a crazy question to ask, especially when you're in a headspace that you're in now, because it's not the same. You got to find weird ways to be able to anchor something to train for. But anyhow, we'll go down that path later. With Strongman, you said you fell into a gym with these two guys. How did they convince you? I guess it wouldn't have taken that much convincing, but what led to the first show?
The first show was actually just a fundraiser they were putting on. Like, they had gotten, I don't remember the show, but they had been invited to compete in Norway, and they're just trying to raise money. So I don't think I even trained for it. Like, they're just two of my buddies that were putting on a fundraiser, and I wanted to support them. Sure, I'll jump in and do it, just like to support you guys. But I don't think trying to look back, I don't think I trained for it. I just like showed up and like, all right, show me how to do these things. And then it was just so fun. So I think I did another show maybe like 6 months later. I was like, oh, I kind of want to try like actually training for one of these and see how it goes. And that was my first like sanctioned.
Do you remember what the events were?
The first one, I remember there was some like weird rigged up Hercules hold with like hanging plates. We had like a carry medley where they didn't have Atlas stones, so they like stacked bumper plates on a loading pin to carry around. There was a deadlift, some sort of overhead medley. I don't remember what the last event was, but I do remember I like ate shit on the sandbag carry, and like I didn't do great. I didn't do terribly, but I'm like, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah. What was it about the second one that made you think this is something you want to really lean into?
It was just fun. I think I love powerlifting and feeling strong. I like Strongman because it makes me feel strong and athletic. And I think doing that first show, I was like, I loved the variety, and I liked how it made me feel. Like, I felt empowered at the end more than just like lifting 1 rep max did. Like, it was way harder and more tiring. Like, hitting a max reps for 60 seconds is way harder than hitting 1 rep. And like that, like fatigue and feeling like dead afterwards, I loved. Like, those like really hard conditioning type events, like they just feel good. I don't know, like in a twisted way.
And now you have 4 more events to go.
Yeah. Like, I love that challenge.
Yeah.
So that'd be 2015, 2016, right around there?
Yep.
Was there a path that you could see with that? Because Strongman is kind of like powerlifting, where it's kind of all fucked up. You don't know what federation or what path to be able to go. And did you, in your mind, find some path? Like, here's where you want to go. Like, what's the next step? Or was it just kind of bumping around from show to show?
Loosely. So like at the time, there was kind of that, like the general path that everyone took. There were local shows qualified you for nationals qualified for the Arnold. And that was kind of what people did. Beyond that, I didn't really. The sport was newer for women. I was newer to it. We didn't have things like the Rogue, Arnold Strongwoman Classic. We didn't have like the Rogue Invitational. And I think that was actually better for me. Like, I do consultations with people now where they tell me like they're just starting out and they're like, I want to go to Giants Live, or I want to go to Rogue Invitational. And I think having big goals is important. And like, I'm not hating on that. But I do think that there's steps missing there. And I think something that was really good for me when I first started is that I didn't have like a far off in the distance end goal. And so I was just focused on the next step. I was just focused on getting better. I was just focused on like what the next local show I was doing, those events, focusing on bettering myself. I think people rush those steps, and they're like, they try to get to the end so fast that they miss all the opportunity for progress in between. And I think that was actually good for me. The first couple of years, I was just focused on getting better.
Can you guys kind of drill down on what you mean by opportunities for progress during those steps? Because let's not kid ourselves. Like if you were coming up today, you would want to do the same thing that they're doing.
Yeah,
like how
absolutely.
do you get to the top fastest?
Actually, I think part of what contributes to that is in strongman, there's a lack of very clear paths of progression. So nobody knows exactly what should I do to get to Giants Live or World's Strongest Man. It can sometimes change. It's less fleshed out. So part of that, I can see someone coming new to the sport and they know what Giants Live is. They know what World's Strongest Man is. They'll be like, yeah, that's what I want to do. They don't know that there's a whole set of steps to get there. We know because we've been through it one way or another. But again, it involves being familiar with the people that are putting on these shows, that are somehow involved in the sport, to figure out the path. So I guess something that contributes to that whole I want to get to Giants Live is that they just don't know anything that's in between. So maybe if there were more official paths that people could take, they could aim at something more realistic.
I just think there's also value in putting in years of work first.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. What are the physical preparation
and I think with
metrics?
And with strongman, especially, there's so many different events that, like, I think in powerlifting, like, someone can get really good at squat, bench, deadlift very early and compete at a very high level very quickly if they are naturally gifted at those events. But I think in strongman, you'll see people have these huge, like, fast rises where they'll do like a local show and then nationals and then the Arnold, and they'll just win. And then they're doing like these major shows. It's only their fourth or fifth show, which means that there's dozens of events they've never done before. And so you can be thrown into these huge shows with events that you have no experience with because you haven't put in the time. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's really cool for people that come out of nowhere and they have these great experiences. But I think a huge benefit that I had was years of working through like so many different events. And at this point, I won't say that I'm like the best at anything, but I think my strength as an athlete is that I don't have many weaknesses. Like there are very few events that I'm really bad at because I think I took a lot of years to kind of build that foundation across so many different disciplines that you just can't do quickly.
And that's extremely rare in strongman. You'll usually get guys that are really good at a few events, really horrible at others.
Yeah.
So to be good at pretty much everything is really rare.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at, or what are those metrics, that covers all those bases, right? Because you have deadlifting events, you have overhead pressing. There's some standard variants of things that are going to kind of always be the same, but then there's the one-off things. What are some of those one-off things that if it got thrown into one of these bigger events, that somebody that doesn't have the experience is either technically going to get smoked or physically just going to get smoked?
I think you're always seeing new stuff. There's just dozens of different types of events that are even just standard events. But even this weekend, like I have 2 out of 6 events this weekend that I've never done before. We have like the timber trial thing. It's like that log front carry into a sled drag. No one's done that before. They made it up for this show. But I think that athletes with, a long history of experience dealing with that can adapt quicker, think on the fly, just like general body awareness and body movement. Like even if you haven't trained that specific event for a long time, I think just longevity in the sport and experience makes you more adaptable.
Or you've at least done something similar to it.
Yeah. So if there's something similar, you could think back to what you screwed up or what. So you have a better base to kind of go into it with than somebody that doesn't. Because there's that technical aspect, but then there's a whole other technical aspect where, tacky can be different based upon the environment. How are you going to learn that?
Yeah.
Trial and error. And you only get that over time.
Plus, I guess onto your question, then perhaps this would be a good question to ask you. So obviously over the years, especially in the strongwoman side, the sport has progressed massively in the last 5 to 10 years. So when you're asking what is like a specific standard that you're aiming for people to get to in competition, that has progressed also massively. Like what would be a really big deadlift before for most strong women is now what most strong women can do. So how have you found that, like chasing that ever increasing standard?
It's hard. Everyone's getting so strong. I think it's cool because the more interest there is in the sport, the more people are involved in the sport and the greater, depth of talent you have, which is great. It makes it hard to keep up.
Yeah.
And I think it does continue to favor well-rounded athletes because the reality is we have all these specialists coming out of the woodworks, like huge deadlifters and huge pressers. The reality is most people that specialize in something have a deficit somewhere else. And so it's really cool to see these like huge world records. But I don't think it's necessarily breeding well-rounded athletes. And I think you see that it's different from like the men and the women's side. Like, I think in general on the men's side, you can kind of list the top 3 to 5 men that are probably going to win any show, regardless of the events. On the women's side, I think you see like these weird like spikes, like women that are really good at certain things or like having specialties in certain things, where event selection really shakes things up. And it's like this Arnold lineup of women. I think if you did 10 different shows with 10 different sets of events, you'd have a different podium in each one. And that's kind of cool. But I think that in part that's because it's newer on the women's side. I also think that makes it more fun.
Are you looking to boost recovery, enhance your sex drive, and improve performance in the gym? Do you think your hormones are out of whack and you're tired of getting the runaround from your doctor? You know, things like your hormones are just fine, stop lifting heavy weights, etc., etc., etc. I know what that feels like, as I've been down that road most of my life. This is why we've partnered with Merrick Health. Merrick Health is a premium telehealth platform that specializes in hormone optimization and preventative medicine, ensuring a better quality of life. Merrick Health offers a Table Talk panel tailored for our listeners, featuring comprehensive tests like total and free testosterone, sensitive estradiol, and advanced markers like lipoprotein A and IGF-1. These comprehensive panels of up to 84 carefully selected biomarkers allow you to identify areas of enhancement and maximize your physical, cognitive, and sexual performance. It's much different than the panels you may get from your doctor. Choose between self-service options where you can select lab panels based upon decades of experience, or opt for guided optimization with your own health coach. Start with a detailed breakdown of your labs and receive personalized treatment options, both over the counter and prescription. Visit merrickhealth.com/tabletalk and use the code TABLETALK to get 10% off your first order. Merrick Health isn't just about better health, it's about empowering you to take control of your well-being.
Yeah. Okay, so given then also...
I'm trying to figure out why that is, right? Do you think as the sport progresses, it will then become more kind of how the men are always the same ones?
I think maybe. I think if we can get to the point where there's like more women that have been doing it for longer and becoming more well-rounded, and we have a bigger, depth of talent, I think you might start to see that change. I don't know. That's just speculation. Yeah. But I think at this point, you see a really wide variety of skills, more so on the women's side, I think, than on the men's side.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead with what you're saying. If you can remember.
Oh, yes. Okay. So more interesting then. So considering all the weight classes that you have competed in, do you find any more challenging than the other ones? Is there one that you'd really want to go back to, and why? Is it like the most challenging one?
It's tough. I mean, for me, I think open shows are always going to be more challenging. I'm a smaller athlete. The weights are really heavy, and it's just physically really hard. But cutting to 73, like the diet part is hard. Like the nutrition is really hard to get down. So it's just different types of hard. I really like competing in the weight classes. I think there's a lot of really athletic, like skillful and technical athletes in the weight classes that are really fun to compete against. It's tough though, because the big shows are open shows, the Arnold and the Rogue Invitational. We don't have stuff like that for the weight classes. And so I think it kind of forces me to either gonna go up and down, or at this point, maybe commit to staying in the open class, because that's where the opportunities are that I want to pursue.
What would you have to do that? Just
time.
Yeah.
And I think I don't regret anything. I love the time I've spent going between weight classes. I think that's something that no one else has really done, and I'm very proud of that. I do feel like I'm at a point in my career that I kind of have to commit one way or the other. I think one of the biggest things holding me back from being a great open athlete is the fact that I keep dipping down and kind of bouncing around weight classes, and it's hard to kind of keep building that strength when like once a year I
how close
lose
are you,
30 pounds.
How close are you to the cap for the open?
There's no cap.
No, for the class under open.
I could pretty easily cut down to 82, but like,
well,
which
for what's that mean? I mean, for some people, I can get pretty easily cut down, and it's 18 pounds.
Yeah,
I'm cutting down to 80 pounds.
Yeah, easy for him, right? But somebody lean.
So like for a water cut, 8 to 10 pounds is relatively easy.
Yeah.
12 to 15 is starting to get pretty
Mhm.
challenging. I think like for OSG, for Worlds this past year, I cut down to 73, so 160 pounds. I think I started the dieting down process at like 178. So it was like 18 pounds total between dieting and water cutting.
Well, see, that's kind of what the power lifters will run into with the weight classes as well, because the longer you do this, the more lean mass you put on.
And it gets harder and harder.
The cuts get harder and harder to a point that they begin to be detrimental no matter what you do. And then when they finally go up that next weight class, not only do they put on all the muscle mass that they weren't able to keep, but then all this new muscle mass comes on as well. And the hope is that the strength will accommodate with that. But it's a risk too, because it's a different class.
Yeah.
You know, but if you're close, and it sounds like you're kind of close to that bubble there.
Yeah. So the weight classes are 160 and then 180. And I sit very comfortably walking around at like 178, which is a really inconvenient weight to be. It's kind of like at like a weight too small to be a 180, but it's a hard cut down to 73, which makes it tricky. To your point though, like just bumping up isn't always as easy as just putting on weight and then feeling stronger. Like, especially going from a 73 show in December to an open show now, this is the fastest I've ever put on weight. I've usually just bumped like kind of like one rung of the ladder at a time. And so going like two rungs up has been really hard. I think I weighed in at 158 for OSG beginning of December, and weighed in the other morning at 194. In like 12 weeks, 14 weeks. It feels bad.
So would you have to carry around a little over 200 for the open then if you stayed there?
I would probably settle more around this weight. For me, the reality is I'm never going to be the strongest open athlete. I'm not 6'3". Like I'm never going to be the statically strongest. And so just getting bigger and stronger, I don't think is going to help me. For me, my strengths are like my athleticism, skill, technicality, stuff like that I don't think just putting on a bunch of mass will help. I think it's going to hurt my strengths and not help my weaknesses enough to make a difference.
Well, that right there is kind of going into the 10 years experience and the strategic aspect of the sport, is being able to actually think those things through.
Knowing your body, knowing the sport.
Yeah, where a younger athlete, you know, go back 8 years, like, fuck it. Yeah, I go up, I'm going to be stronger.
Yep.
Right? Because they don't have that experience that you're talking about with that well-roundedness, because you don't have to win every event. You just have to point better than everybody else at the end.
No, it's better to take second or third place in every event than it is to win every event and then take last in one. You know, you see that a lot with people that specialize. They'll take like first, last, first, and like they'll probably still end up on podium, but it's really hard to win if you suck at something. But the reality is you don't have to win a single event to win a show.
What have been the challenges that you faced with international competition, traveling?
I actually really like it. I think for me, like the excitement and adrenaline of being somewhere else kind of, I mean, I die when I come home and I'm exhausted afterwards. But I think probably just also because I haven't had to do it that much. I think if I was doing it all the time, it would start to get really challenging. But the few times that I've done it, I think I'm just excited to be there. And so I don't really notice being tired until I get home.
What are some of the tricks that you use? You travel a lot. You travel more than you don't.
Yeah, especially through the on-season of competing. I think part of it is we always stay for an extra week wherever we travel just to see the sights and so on. So you've had your competition on a Saturday, you're recovering on the Sunday. The last thing you want to do is walk around a bunch. But I find that it actually surprisingly helps quite a bit. So just forcing that walk in, seeing the sights, going up and down all these stairs, or, you know, catching the bus, the tram, all of that contributes to a much faster recovery than just lying around and not doing anything, or even better than getting into a plane and sitting around for another 8 hours crammed up in a can.
Yeah. See, that's always the hardest part. Like getting there and getting through the show is usually not too bad with like long travel, but afterwards is always pretty rough.
Yeah. When you're all beaten up, sore, bruised all over, and you're trying to sit in the plane.
Yeah, trying to do like an 8-hour plane ride like the day after competing is not it.
By far the worst, especially with the lack of any proper food. At least on the way there, you can prep your own food or get ready for that. On the way back, you're at the mercy of whatever you find on other place.
Yeah.
For you, what's the turnaround time been from one show to another? I know it's going to change.
It's been different. So in my perfect world, I would love to compete twice a year. Like that's where I feel good. I like to take like long off, because off seasons I feel like are when you get better. Like that's when you actually like work on your weaknesses, build foundational skills. I like taking a long off season. It hasn't really worked out that way the last couple of years, because it's hard. Like as opportunities come up and like there's certain things you have to do to get these opportunities. I think the last 2 years I've competed 4 times each year, which is more than my preference. But I like to have a minimum of 12 weeks between shows.
What do you mean by there's certain things you have to do for the shows?
Oh, it's just like, I'm trying to think, like last year, what was last year, 2023? Yeah, so like the Arnold didn't go great. I got injured on the last event and I didn't get the placing that I wanted. So my hope was to do well enough at the Arnold that I was like super confident in a rogue invite. I got injured and that didn't happen. So then I felt like I had to do other shows throughout the year to like stay on the scene, stay relevant, I guess.
That's exactly the word. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Like it's hard. Like the sport is growing fast, but I think also because of that, it's easy to fall off. And so I didn't want to just do the Arnold and then fall off. So like I felt like I had to keep doing other shows throughout the year to stay on the scene.
As a promoter, is that because a lot of these things can be true or not true, right? It can just be things that you make up in your head that you think you have to do. But as a promoter, is that something they have to do?
I'd say close enough. Yeah, that is it, because always as a promoter, also you want to have the most relevant athletes. You love that they're strong, that they're good, but you want people to know, because you're also relying on your sponsors, on your TV show. There's certain quotas of interest that you have to fulfill on all sides. So it'd be great having the person that nobody knows about that's super strong as a one-off, but the rest of the roster needs to be filled with people that people actually know. So yeah, staying relevant is unfortunately a very important part of the game. So like what you mentioned, you cannot afford to miss some opportunities.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of controversy around that in terms of like how invites are done, and that's a whole big topic. But like there is truth.
I'd love to hear this.
There is truth to that though, because like if we want the sport to grow, growth comes just as much from like the fans and spectators as anything else. Like if you think of wildly successful sports like NFL football, 99% of the people that watch football don't play football. They're just fans. Yeah. And I think that that's something that Strongman somewhat does, like some promoters do a good job about, but I think the sport as a whole needs to do a better job about in terms of appealing more to the fans and the spectators. And like that's where the money comes from, and that's where the growth of the sport overall comes from. And so it's tough because the athlete in me wants the shows to just be the best athletes, and it should be merit based, and it should be all of the top people, and the best athletes should be getting the invites. But I also understand the business of fans want to see certain people, and people buy tickets to watch the people that they're interested in just as much as the sport they're interested in, and it's a hard balance to find. But they're both important.
But wouldn't that be part of just becoming pro? Because in any other sport, well, outside of like powerlifting and stuff like that, when you become pro, also comes those other aspects that have to be part of being the pro. You see what I'm saying? So with even the NFL, a lot of those guys, they still have things they have to do, right? Which is not part of the actual sport, but it's for the team or the owners or whatever the hell it is. And that's probably true with all sports across the board. But that's not true at the amateur level. So it's like, hey, yeah, I'm pro. And then you're like, oh, fuck, I got to do all this stuff.
So I'm curious, what things are you talking about specifically?
Just media stuff, personality, compliance, watching what the hell you say, all the time, because now it's going to be amplified because people are going to be looking for things that you're going to screw up on, which you can fly under the radar at an amateur level in just about any sport, maybe not Texas high school football, but, pretty much any sport. But a lot of those, it's different in the strength sport because it goes from like blind to light. There's not this progression to where if it's a great high school football player, they got college to kind of learn compliance and all this other ass kissing and all this other kind of crap that goes along with it before they get to the pro level. And there are going to be outliers that are just like, screw all that. But, they're rare. The number of people that actually are able to be Charles Barkley or something like that, it's rare. So I would see that as it's just kind of being part of that next level.
And I think it seems to be strongman more than other sports. And maybe it's just because that's what I'm exposed to, but I think there's a lot of athletes that are really upset about that. And I get it, because it would be really great to just focus on being a great athlete, and just being the best in the world at something is enough to, be a pro and make a living. And like, in a perfect world, that would be great. That's not how it works. And so there's I actually did a podcast about this recently too, because I'm super passionate about talking about it. Like, there's more to that job. Like, if you want to be a career athlete, like, there are other job requirements besides just showing up and competing. There's like you said, like the media and
exposure,
watching what you say, and there's parts of the job that not everyone wants to do, and that's okay. But you also can't expect this when you're not doing the things required for it.
Yeah, there's two parts of it. So like, if I'm putting on a pro show and putting in all the effort, which most athletes don't even realize how much effort goes into it, then obviously I want athletes to actually putting in the effort to being an athlete, not just the performance of an athlete. But I can't afford to have someone say something wildly inappropriate on the TV report that's going out live, and then what am I going to do? Like, I'm losing out sponsors and audience just because of that.
But I would assume that's a given across all the top athletes, though.
Should be.
Right? So if there's if there's this other metric, that one athlete can be able to use to beat another athlete who may be genetically superior than what they are, then isn't that kind of evening the battlefield? Because if they're better at the promotional aspect and they're better at their personality, and the other person doesn't do any of that kind of stuff, but they end up getting to the show and the other one doesn't, they just use other genetic tools that they may have that the other person may not have. Well, I get it sounds fucked up, right?
And there's a lot of controversy around that, and I understand like why that is kind of shitty.
We'll get better at promotion.
But like, those are skills that anyone can develop, and I think I actually get a lot of people now that reach out and tell me like, well, it's lucky that you're like natural on camera and like all these things. I'm like, I had to work really hard. Like I sucked at this stuff a few years ago, and I hate it. Like, I was one of those people. It's like, it was after I won my first world title, and I thought it was going to change my life, and it didn't. Like it was cool. And I did a couple podcasts, and then like crickets. And then I realized like I was at the point where at the time I was really upset. I'm like, I just proved I'm like the best in the world at a thing. Like, shouldn't that be enough? And a couple different things happened where it was like a wake up call. I'd be like, no, it's not enough. And I had to start like practicing talking to a camera. I sat in my room and turned a camera on and like made myself talk to it, which felt ridiculous. But this is a thing that I need to get better at. And I, took some courses on social media and how it works, and like stuff that I never thought would be part of my job as an athlete. But I was like, these are things that unfortunately or unfortunately are part of the job for what I'm trying to do.
One of my first pro shows, they asked us to film a little snippet so that they could post on Instagram. It was a 30-second snippet, if that. I spent about 40 minutes trying to record it because everything I said was just terrible, or at least seemed to me that way.
I'd say very few people, especially in strength sports, are going to be that personality type that's going to... They're not entertainers.
Yeah, some very
probably
few
getting into the sport for reasons that exclude having other people around them.
Yep.
That's the whole point of doing this. Like, fuck you, I'm doing this with my little friends, and fuck all you guys. Where you end up at this point where you got to embrace all that. So I wouldn't say that's everybody, that has to be able to go through that phase. Yeah.
And I think I was talking to someone else, like, it's not even just like strength sports. It's just kind of the world in general right now. Like, marketing happens online and through video. And there's skills that I think a lot of people didn't think they'd ever have to develop for their jobs, but it's kind of just the way the world is going right now.
Yeah. Gonna go down a different route here. As a woman in Strongman when you came in, right? Because two things have happened. Strongman's grown overall, and the women's side of Strongman's grown overall. So you come in and it's a super, super niche sport. Still a niche sport, but it's grown over a period of time. So what's it been like just with the growth in general, but then being a woman basically in a sport that was known as Strongman, for decades before?
I mean, it's crazy. I think I've seen the sport grow so much. When I first did my first show, I think there were 2 women there. So it's cool to see like increasingly more and more women. Obviously we have like whole like women only shows now that are put on. So it's come a long way. I think we're getting to a better point now. I think it was weird a few years ago, like as these opportunities were first starting to come up. I think it created a lot of conflict in the sport. I think there was a little bit of like a scarcity mindset with the women, like it was still new. There were fewer of us doing it. The spots for opportunities at the top were limited. And I think it kind of like created some conflict for a little bit, and confusion about how to get to these points. And I think we're getting to a better place where, there's bigger opportunities. There's a clearer path to getting there. So seeing that development has been good. I think it's going in a more positive way where there's kind of more positivity around those opportunities instead of like everyone kind of fighting for them, which has been, I think, a hard process to kind of see us go through. But I think we're ending up in a good spot. And it is cool to watch, like I said, my first show, there were like 2 of us. And now I go to shows where there's like 50 women at local shows.
Well, on the other end, you could just be cool, dominating everything if it was just 5 people.
True, but that's not as fun.
Yeah. So what about being a woman in these competitions where the men are always going to be the focus, or is that changed to where the men are not the total focus?
I think it's starting to change just recently. I think, especially like the Arnold last year, with Rogue taking on like the women's side, I think we're on year 3 of that. I remember the first year I came and watched. I wasn't part of the women's show the first year that Rogue took it on, but I came and I watched it. And I think people in the audience were talking just as much about the women as the men. It's not like the women came out and everyone was like, oh, it's time to like run to the bathroom and grab a snack. Like the stands were full the entire time. And like last year, like afterwards, I feel like more people were talking about the women's show than the men's show. And like, I think there's finally starting to be some equal interest. I do think that that's still kind of the open classes. I would love to at some point see that trickling down into the weight classes, but I do think open women are I think still steps behind the men. Men have just more shows, World's Strongest Man, Shaw, Rogue, Arnold. Like there are more opportunities, but the opportunities that women are being given to be on the same platform, I think people have been just as interested in them.
Yeah. What have you seen as a promoter?
I'd say it also comes on back to the point that we discussed where as an athlete, you have to promote yourself, because then as a promoter, I have more incentive to bring you on even like a woman's only pro show, just because then I know I can sell the tickets. So, if I'm going to invite a bunch of women to compete and then I can't get an audience to justify all that, it's terrible. So the women are actually putting an amazing amount of work into their social media too. We discussed that through a previous episode where the amount of viewership that the top 10 women get is significantly higher than the top 10 guys. Most cases.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Surprisingly. So view for view, there's a lot more attention on the woman. It just needs to be utilized a lot better, and given all the opportunities, which is happening nowadays. So that's really nice to see.
Well, what I'm going to say is going to be controversial. It's true. Women in general, if you're in gyms and it's the powerlifters or the strong women, they train way harder than the men do.
They do.
So I would assume they're going to work the media side harder as well.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is, by the way? Because every coach tells me this.
Better. I don't know. In general, women can handle more volume than men. So I think by necessity, we kind of have to train harder to get the same training responses. So I don't know if it's just out of necessity we have to train harder. I guess I don't know what the...
Well, for yourself, have you found that you do need to do more volume?
Usually, yes. I think when it depends on the weight class.
Yeah.
I think like with open shows, I have to be a lot more selective and nuanced with things, because like my body and my frame just can't handle the same volume at those super heavy weights. So I have to be a little bit more careful just to not like fall apart. And so the volume has to come down, has to be a little bit more like skill based. But in general, like especially like off season, I think my volume can just be stupid high sometimes, and I wish it didn't have to be. But
Yeah.
like especially like like hypertrophy block, like in a bulking like off season, like the amount of volume I need to do to put on mass is just stupid.
What's an example of that?
Oh, I don't know. I remember like last year, I kind of took some time to, I needed to put on size on my legs, and like my leg days would be like 4 or 5 hours of like bodybuilder style, like 6 sets into failure and drop sets. Like I was training like a bodybuilder, and it was exhausting. But I feel I recover from them a lot faster. And it's like, hey, it's leg day again, like 3 or 4 days later.
So how do you periodize your program over, a training cycle for a show? Given you have 6 months, right? So there's like, I get the variability.
So it kind of depends. I have a coach, so like I just do what I'm told. Actually, I'm working with a new coach last year, so things have changed a little bit. As a coach, I kind of like to structure it and like, depends on the person, but generally like GPP, hypertrophy, speed, power development, strength, and then like skill-based event training is kind of how I would break it up. And then depending on the athlete and how much time we have and what their strengths and weaknesses are, we'll spend maybe more or less time in one of those phases. But that's kind of a general like off-season progression of focus.
When you have people come to you, as a coach, where do you see the biggest pitfalls that they're making?
It depends on the athlete and how long they've been in the sport. I think a lot of people train events too hard, too often, too early for shows. I see people like starting to do event training like 16 to 20 weeks out from a show sometimes. It's like, what are you doing? I think a lot of people don't spend as much time like working on foundational skills. Like what are the foundational skills we need before we start training these events instead of just jumping into doing the event for 4 months straight.
What would you say those are? Those foundational skills?
I mean, it depends on the lift, but if you did like for like Atlas stones or something, like you don't necessarily need to be training stones for 6 months. Like, I think depending on the athlete and their skill development, you can do like light technique work, whatever. But, depending on strengths, weaknesses, like front squats, searcher squats, like building the actual strength involved, working on like T-spine mobility, mobility limitations that might be hindering your ability to do an event efficiently, stuff like that can get ignored if you just jump into doing it all the time.
Well, most will ignore the things that you just said.
Yeah.
Right? Because by default, it's going to be the deadlift, the squat, overhead press, all the basic things. So you find that kind of universal with everybody that would come to you? I mean, you're talking front squats and stuff like that. Not a whole lot of people are going to do that. Zercher squats, it drops way down even more so.
Yep. But it's like the stuff that people don't want to do is usually the things they need to be doing.
Yeah.
Well, talking about things that most people ignore, especially as an athlete that competes in so many weight classes, we notice you travel with your own nutritionist.
How important is that in the background?
How important is that to you, and how much does that contribute? It's
such a huge help. I mean, obviously, nutrition is a huge part of it. I'll admit I'm really bad about like meal prepping and like stuff like that. So for me, it's nice to have a nutrition coach that I can like bring with me to things, and he kind of does the thinking for me. But like to your point, like going up and down weight classes. It's easy to gain and lose weight. It's hard to gain and lose weight smartly and without killing your performance. And like nutrition and like vitamins and like supplementation and stuff like that sleep, recovery. Like there's so many different components that you can only train as hard as you can recover from. Nutrition's a big part of that. So
coming from the background to where the nutrition was a major issue, how were you able to mentally embrace all this to do a bulk phase? Because that's radically different.
It's hard. And I think when I first started lifting, I didn't have a nutrition coach, and I didn't do it very smart. Like I think I still held on to some of like the non-productive thought patterns. And for me, hiring a nutrition coach is really important because it just in someone else's hands. And fortunately, someone that I've worked with for a long time and I trust, and we can talk about these things. If I'm starting to struggle, we can be really open about it. But I also trust that he has my best interest in mind. He knows what's important to me. He knows what my boundaries are. And so it just leaves, it takes the thinking out of it for me. Like he gives me a plan, and it's just my job to follow it. And if I'm not feeling good or things we have really open communication and we can make changes. But for me, it was just like that being able to trust someone else to take that over was really important for me because I couldn't trust myself to do it objectively.
How soon did that become part of the process?
Oh, I hired Spencer in beginning of 2021. So a ways in. I should have been working with someone on nutrition much earlier. I didn't do a healthy job of it myself. But I've been with Spencer for I guess 4 years now.
So how would you define not doing a healthy job? What are some examples?
Oh, I think just a lot of the kind of those disordered eating tendencies would always kind of creep back in, like binging and purging cycles, and just like food. If I have to lose weight, I'll just stop eating, or I'll just eat less, and it's like it's not always that simple. And having a really hard time with putting on weight, and having someone else actually make the plan and like kind of reaffirm over and over that like it's okay. Like I've put on a ton of weight the last few weeks in a way that like 5 years ago I would have a really hard time with mentally, and I still do. Like there's parts of that are uncomfortable and I have a hard time with, but having a coach that tells me like, no, it's okay, we're on track, this is what needs to be happening, this is like remind me of the goal, and like talk about how like these changes lead into the ultimate goal, has been important for me.
What do you mean by having a hard time with it? Just how you physically look, or is it
how I look,
mental?
how I feel? It's I've never been this heavy before, and like there's parts of that mentally that are hard. Like, kind of coming back to some of like the marketing stuff too. Like there's thoughts in my head of like, if I don't look a certain way, am I going to be as marketable? And that's a ridiculous thing to have to think about in a strength sport where it's not about what we look like. We're not bodybuilding. I don't have to have abs. And I know that logically, but there's always like those thoughts. And I know thoughts in my head that are not always super logical, that are just residual from years of not being mentally healthy.
So how do you go about mentally reframing those thoughts? Because that's, well, you can go way back now, right? Because they're going to come in, and it can become cyclical or circular, over and over and over. But at some point you got to stop and reframe it, so how have you over this whole process been able to do that?
I think for me, it's always just kind of keeping my eyes on like the goal. I think that was a really important factor in the switch from powerlifting to strongman, because while I loved powerlifting, I don't think I ever loved it enough to make those uncomfortable decisions and like accept. I didn't eat enough when I was powerlifting. I think I didn't love it enough to let go of those habits. I love strongman. I have really big goals and I'm really passionate about achieving them. And so at the end of the day, like reminding myself of that, like no matter how I feel, nothing is as important as working toward those goals. And like, I like to like look back at like old photos, or have like I had a screensaver on my phone for a really long time that was from the Giants Live show, because that was, I think, probably one of the best feeling moments in my career. And so I like to like look at things like that and ask myself like, would you be okay with never feeling like that again? And at some point in my life, I might get to a point where the answer is like, that's okay. Like, and that, I think that's when I know that I'm ready to be done. But like, until then, so far the answer has been no. Like, I'm not ready to let go of that feeling. And so I know just logically, like, these are the things that I need to be doing to return to that feeling.
Well, the phone would be an example of something that's kind of proactive, because every time you pick it up, you're going to be able to see that. What are the reactive things to where when you're laying at night and those the negative crap starts going through your head and it starts to become that cycle that I'm talking about? How do you go about breaking that?
For me, it's the biggest thing has been having a team of people that I trust and can talk to, because I know that I can't always trust my own thoughts, but being able to share them with other people who can kind of be a sounding board and, keep me in check, I think has been the most valuable thing, is just talking about it. Because even sometimes, like, I'll have thoughts and I'll say them out loud and be like, wow, that sounds silly. And just having someone to talk through them with, I think, is the most important thing. And I think a lot of people like to just bottle it up.
Yeah.
And like, I think the best thing you can do is just own it and talk about it. And then I think a lot of times you'll realize like, oh, I'm being kind of silly.
Do you find that I try to keep people around me that are realists, but then I also try to keep people around me that are enablers, so people to like enable the stupid shit.
Yeah.
But then the realists.
Do one more.
Yeah. So do you find a balance that you have to have those two type of people around you? Because you can end up leaning more into one that you want to bias at a certain time than the other. So how do you go about that balance?
Yeah, it depends on context. I think I am very fortunate in that I train at a gym with a lot of high-level athletes. And so we all kind of get it. And I think all of us can kind of tell, like, when someone's just kind of being a bitch and needs to be pushed a little bit versus when someone needs to, like, a reality check versus if someone needs like compassion. I think because we've all been there, we've all competed at a high level. Like there's several of us, like there's 3 of us here that are competing at the Arnold, which is crazy. Like 3 out of the same gym. We have like Olympic level weightlifters. We just have a lot of people in the same boat. And I think that that's also really valuable, is like surrounding yourself with people who are kind of going after the same things as you, or similar things, or have similar goals, and a similar mindset. I think can end up being both of those people, because they know when one's appropriate.
Do you worry from a mental health standpoint that you can always drop back to where it was that led to you having to go to the camp? So how do you manage that?
I think that's not been so much of a worry the past couple of years. I think really just because I love Strongman so much. And at this point, like, even if I were to stop competing, like you asked me earlier if I would keep training if I stopped competing, at this point I would. And so for me, like, that love in my life, I think will always trump what else is going on.
Well, you said over the past years when you started to come to that realization. So what helped you come to that realization?
I think it's not so much a realization, is that I started letting myself have fun again. I think I got to a point in my career where I took everything way too seriously, and it was like everything was black and white. I did everything like textbook perfect. Like I had to I cut people like socializing out of my life, and like I just didn't let myself have fun for a long time. I think in my brain I was like, if I was having fun, I wasn't working hard enough. And it was like, which is silly, like it can be both, but I took it way too seriously and I didn't let myself enjoy my life for a long time. And I think the last like year and a half, I've kind of started to like find the joy in things again. Me and Angelica Jardine, she's the last year Arnold winner. She's here this weekend. We started doing like content together, just like stupid gym challenges and like shenanigans at the gym that we started posting for content. And it's kind of funny now that I go places and people recognize us for that. Like, we love the content you're putting out. Like, thanks for showing that the gym can be a fun place. And which is kind of funny to me after years of being so much the opposite of that now I'm associated by like strangers as being this like advocate for fun in the gym. But I think that's important. I think that's been the biggest mindset shift for me, is accepting that it's better to be mentally healthy and maybe not do everything perfectly. And that actually has helped my performance instead of like doing everything by the book and being miserable.
Well, it's an easy trap to fall down because this is your career too, right? So you don't think you're working hard enough. And it's that I see a lot of people that go through that and then they get stuck in it. And then they end up in this weird place where they actually start to hate, the thing that they're doing.
Yeah, I think it was probably like a year and a half ago. I think I got to that point where I realized like I don't enjoy this anymore. And I was like, why is that? Like I started doing this because I loved it and because it was fun. And then I got to a point where I like dreaded training and I wasn't even looking forward to competing. And I was like, something has to change.
Do you have the opportunity to go to just some local shows here and there?
I do. Yeah. I actually really like judging shows. So every once in a while we'll go out and like, there's an all women show in California that I judge every year and I have a blast doing that. I'll help with like the show that we put on at Dungeon each year. And I love doing that. I love kind of revisiting the amateur side of the sport.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying what you're watching, make sure to take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe.
And being like around people that are excited doing their first show. I think some of us get like removed from that. well,
I have a lot of, when I see those things with powerlifters, I try to have them do that same thing, because when they do that, they're reminded, of that this is fun. And then
that's why you stop.
Yeah. I mean, you may see the person deadlift 315 that's overcoming cancer. It's not a big deadlift, but it is for them.
Yeah. But you see the excitement on their face, like when they achieve that, like,
and that's why you started in the first place. And when you're at the pro level, at the top level, and that's all you're really ever around, then it is strategic. It's, all the boxes have to be checked. It's a full-time job. And that's all you see is other people doing that full-time job. And it becomes that full-time job. Then you fucking hate it.
Yeah.
And then you go back and you're like, oh, this is why I started.
Yeah.
So that grounding of that. So what advice would you have given, if it happened over the past year, what advice would you have given yourself 3 years ago to not get to that place? And you can't say just have fun.
I would say in general to not pay so much attention to what other people were doing. I think that's when it started to get stressful, when I started like, who am I going up against? What do I need to do to win? What do I need? Like, who do I need to beat? And it started to become like just too much. Like I got too obsessive over it. So I think if I could go back and just kind of focus more on myself, what I was doing, I think that would help a lot.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's what contributed the most to your mindset shift?
Possibly.
Okay.
I think something I do now, I love all the girls I compete against. Most of us are pretty good friends. I'll mute most of them on Instagram, like for prep for a show, because I know myself, and it's like seeing what other people are doing, like it gets in your head. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, well, if they're hitting this, I need to hit this. And I don't think that's productive. Like I can't do any better than my best, and trying to like stress myself out about needing to do more than that. Takes the enjoyment out of the process, but also just creates so much more stress and anxiety that's not productive. And so for me, just like trying not to pay attention to what other people are doing, I think is really important.
Well, if you really think through it, what productive can come from that?
Not at all.
And I guess the only thing would be if you don't work hard at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you work harder, but I don't think that's going to be the case.
You're going to work hard. I think, and there is some strategy, in a show with a lineup, if for like a deadlift, for example, like the reality, like for example, this weekend, the reality is I'm probably taking second to last on the deadlift, because in general, we know what all the girls can roughly deadlift. And I know that whether I PR by 10 pounds or 50 pounds, it's probably not going to change my points that much. So something like that, strategically, it might make sense to think like, do we want to put so much energy into deadlift training if we know that it's not going to affect the points that much? Okay. And so in something like that, it does make sense to kind of keep tabs on what other people are doing. I think it's better to have a coach that you trust that's going to do that for you.
Yeah.
And then they're going to do the work and know what you need to do, so that as an athlete, you can kind of be hands off in terms of like assessing the competition. Yeah. But having a coach that's willing to do that and pay attention, I think is valuable.
Yeah. You had some insight.
Yeah. If you have let's say you have a nutritionist and you have a coach, have you, and it's funny if you don't want to answer this one, but have you also had someone that has helped you with the mental side of it, such as a sports therapist or psychologist?
Yeah, so I've actually was in therapy just with a general counselor up until like maybe a year ago. I actually stopped seeing her for a variety of reasons, but I just actually started recently working with, her name's Amelia, Cerebral Wellbeing on Instagram. She works with a lot of strongman athletes, specifically when it comes to, she specifically works with strength athletes and in like the mentality and, mental health techniques associated with, I'm very recent with her. It's only been a few weeks. I kind of reached out because I felt myself struggling going into the show. It's been a really, really hard prep for the Arnold, and I felt myself kind of mentally struggling. And so I reached out to her a few weeks ago. So it's still new, but it's been great so far. And even like the last couple of weeks, just talking through all of it, I think has helped a lot and got me to a better place, even in the span of 2 or 3 weeks. So.
What are some other strategies that you've used outside of just talk therapy?
She has me doing a lot of like grounding techniques. It was actually really interesting. We were talking about, because she asked me if I'm an angry lifter, and I said no. Like I know some people get like really hyped, like and like headbutt walls and stuff. That's never been me. And so we kind of talked about that, like how to find like hype in the gym. And so she explained it kind of cool. She said like people's like baseline. A lot of times people will like spike and get like really angry, but if you don't like lifting up here and you want to lift more down here, you still need to have an energy spike before you lift. And so she's like, a strategy that she uses is instead like grounding techniques to kind of like bring your baseline down before a lift, so that you're kind of like down here, you can chill out, ground, mellow out, and then use more positive, like motivational strategies to kind of like spike your energy and hype yourself back up to more what would be close to a baseline for someone who's like an angry lifter. But and that's been kind of interesting, like stuff like that I wouldn't have ever thought about. Like for me, it was like I just need to find a way to like get angry when I lift, and it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So that's been really cool.
So it's techniques based upon your heart rate, or is it breathing? How do you bring it ground? Some
breathing drills. Should be like, there's a couple different ones, like body scanning, breathing drills. There's some stuff that's just like different like observational things, like focusing in on something and like identifying small details about it. Just something that kind of takes your mind away from the external environment and like focuses it on something.
What is body scanning?
it's kind of like she has an audio that I listen to. It's kind of like you kind of start at your toes and you're aware of the sensations and like feel your shoes on your feet and you kind of like work up and you're just mindful about the sensations, like feeling your pant leg. You know, like is your skin hot or cold? Like you kind of like scan up your body, and it's just a way to kind of bring your mind inward.
Focus.
Yeah.
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 And with the focusing, when I was in junior high, I had somebody that was mentally helping with sport psychology and stuff like that. And it started with a candle in the flame, you know, so you turn the lights out and then you study the flame. You know, there's the wick and there's the different colors, and the body scanning and all those things is essentially all you're doing is you're focusing on one thing. And while you're focusing on one thing, you can't focus on all the other things. You know, all the distractions that are going to pull you away, negative thoughts, all those other type of things there. And also will decrease the heart rate, which would, you know, help you recover better. Then comes back up. But when you're dealing with that arousal curve, everybody sits different. You know, obviously you can go to the over arousal, but some people need to, I think angry is always bad, by the way, right? Because you can't focus.
Yeah.
Right. And you'll see that if they stay long enough, if they stay around long enough, you're going to see they'll transfer out of that and they'll still mentally be where they need to be, but they're not going to be expanding all that extra energy, which you're going to need for the event you're going to do. Which, if you realistically think this through, it really sounds stupid. Right? Like get yourself super hyped up, waste 10% of your energy, and then do the thing. But it's also not good to go in with doubts and not ready either. So everybody falls in a different place. And it's interesting growing up in gyms, seeing that certain people that may work up here, you know, will see somebody that works here, then get mad at them. Because they don't get angry and super psyched up. It's like, this guy's kicking your ass, by the way, you know, and then you can rub it in and talk shit. Like, you know, you're getting your ass kicked by somebody who doesn't even get psyched up. You know, it's always fun play. But that happened. Have you seen that? Both of you guys, have you seen this same type of scenario in gyms that you've been at? Where you'll take the person that gets overly aroused, right? And then criticize the people that don't, you know, maybe not to their face.
Yeah.
You know,
I think I'm very lucky with having a really great gym environment where we don't see a whole lot of that, but there is definitely a difference. And I think there will be people that will try to like help you get high. People will like yell at me, like, do you want a backslap? I'm like, don't touch me. Like, they just want to help. But I think people always think that like more hype and more energy and louder is better and helpful. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes I'm like, can you please stop yelling? So
if you didn't have the people around to be able to help ground the mental side, where do you think you would be competing now?
What do you mean?
With the mental health history and the mental health challenges that you face, having the therapist and you know the people around, the realist and the enablers and all that, if you were just left to your own demise?
Ooh, I don't know. Probably not. No, I think all of that has been really valuable for me. And I think not just having those people around, but like me being in a space to actually want to work toward getting better. I think a lot of people will like surround themselves with the right people and like go to therapy and like think they're doing the right things. But unless you're actually ready and willing to do the work, I think that's also just having the people around isn't enough, I don't think. I see that a lot too, that people will surround themselves with the right people, but then they'll get feedback or hear things and be like, they'll brush it off. Or like, oh, like
focus on the wrong thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like not take it seriously, or I don't know. You have to get out of that like victim mentality of just accepting that like, oh, this is how I am. You have to be like be ready to change.
Now, if you have somebody that you're training with that is in that position, having you been through all that, how would you help them get ready to change? Because they still have to make that decision.
Yeah, it's really hard. And I've worked with people that like say they want to, but aren't. It's hard because you really can't make someone do the work. You can give them tools and you can help them along the process. But like, I think that is one of the hard parts about being a coach sometimes. Is like sometimes people will come to you and they're really just not willing or ready to change. And you can talk people through that, and sometimes you can reach them. But you also can't force someone to want to change if they don't want to. And that it's hard. I mean, it's hard. And I think until something happens in someone's life to make them want to change, I don't think any sort of talking to people is going to get through most of the time. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when you say that, the first thing that came to my head is, they have to hit a spot that you really don't want to see them hit.
No, and like it's sad, but
You gotta hit rock bottom at some point. Yeah.
But everybody's rock bottom can be different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So when you speak about these topics, do you have people reach out to you?
You mean,
the mental health?
Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
for sure. I think I was really hesitant to start talking about it. Not because I'm very comfortable talking about it. I always get worried because I think there's a lot of people that will post about mental health stuff as kind of like a pity party and just like wanting people to like check in on them. And I didn't want to come across like that. Like I want to talk about my experience in a way that's not like feel bad for me. And it took me a while to kind of gain the courage or confidence to say anything publicly about it, because I'm like, I don't want to come across like I'm just looking for pity from people. And it ended up being wildly positive. I had a lot of people reach out saying like, thanks for sharing that. Like I go through similar things. Can we talk about it? And I think that's for all the negative that social media brings to the world, which I think is a lot. I think there's also a lot of positive in that ability to connect with people and relate to people going through similar experiences that you might not have access to in your day-to-day life. I think has been really cool.
Just letting people know that they're not alone sometimes is all the difference.
Yep.
So
yeah, I did a podcast, I think not last year, but the year before, with a lot of the World's Strongest Woman winners about like the post-comp blues. Because I think it's something that we all kind of go through silently and kind of know that everyone experiences, but no one really talks about it. Like it'll be mentioned, but kind of like joked about. Or and we got together, we did a podcast where we just talked about it for like an hour, like just like openly, like what does that experience actually look like for you, really? And really just talking about it, I think helped a lot. I think all of us felt better. I know I definitely felt better after doing that, just talking through it. I'm like, oh, that actually helped a lot, just to know that it's normal.
Yeah, that you're not the only one. When you guys are together, do you talk about how you manage all the shitty comments too?
I mean, yeah. I mean, that always comes up. Like that, it's hard. At this point, I think most of it just kind of ignore it. But it's tough. I think years ago, they used to bother me a lot more than they do. Most of the time now I can just let it roll off my back, but
Well, you get enough of them and you get callous to it.
Yeah.
And you got to remember it's still engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're trying to build the brand, then the comments are comments.
Yeah. I welcome it. And like, there's days that I'm like not in the mood to deal with it, but in general, it's unfortunately part of putting yourself out there. I think anyone that puts themselves out there publicly, like not just in this space, but anywhere on social media, anyone has any significant following is going to get hate from someone.
Yeah.
I think it's just an unfortunate reality of putting yourself out to the masses.
Well, what can help a lot of you guys is to actually click through and look at who that person is.
Yeah.
And normally they're anonymous, which means they have bigger problems of their own.
Yeah.
The ones that could potentially sting would be the real people, and people that may be in not your immediate circle, but a couple rings outside of your circle. Then maybe there might be some truth in what they're saying, but you know how fucking rare that is.
It's usually straight.
Normally they're going to tell you to your face, it's not going to be that realm, but that's the important thing there, is to realize that it could even be a bot.
Yeah.
You got to think that far, that this could just be some China or Russia farm bot that's just blowing shit up for whatever reason.
I mean, as corny as it is, the one thing that helped me get over a lot of these, especially like my wife's in strength sports too, and I'd get more defensive over her, over the comments that she gets than I would get about mine. I don't care what people say on my videos and whatnot, but realizing that the people trying to hurt you with some sort of terrible comment are the ones also already hurt. That's what gave me a big shift in like, all right, why are you saying this? Do you have other issues? Do you want to discuss? Perhaps it's fine if you do, and often replying positively to the snarkiest comment has turned them around. They're like, oh, sorry, I didn't think about it, or, some weird.
And then that can be the case a lot of the times too. They didn't mean, well, they say, they didn't mean whatever they said. Yeah. But it's interesting because people will bitch about no comments. It's like, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Like, none of my shit gets any comments at all. Then you get comments and 5 out of 20 are shitty.
Yeah.
Like, oh God, this just ruined my day. Like, you know, but
should it really though? That's the point.
No.
It shouldn't whatsoever. Like,
No.
Because I don't think anyone that's accomplishing anything is doing that.
No.
Like no one that's actually working to better themselves has the time or desire to shit on other people trying to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. And you get used to it.
Yeah.
You know, over a period of time. I mean, Elon Musk is getting drilled right now. Like, you think he's really got the time to worry about the negative comments?
Oh, doesn't even look at him.
Yeah. With your path coming up through, there was a point that you also decided that you wanted to make a career out of this. So first question is, why did you want to make a career out of this? Or how did you come to that conclusion that you wanted to make a career out of this? And then how did you go about moving that forward?
Yeah. I just think I can. I mean, I think it's a path that hasn't been tread yet, but I love the sport. And honestly, the idea of like a 9 to 5 has never appealed to me. Like I've never wanted to just go clock into an office job or doing like, I like paving my own path. And so there's appeal to that, like the freedom that it gives my life. I like the ability to, you know, if I get an opportunity next week that I can fly across the country and take it because I'm not tied down to a job. I think that's important to me. And it's just like the ability to do what I love for a career. Who doesn't want that? And there's part of me that it's like, it is frustrating that like I have worked to become the best in the world at something. And I feel like I should be able to make a living doing that. So some of it is a little bit of like a frustration and wanting to prove that I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think a really kind of back to a topic from earlier, hard reality to take in for me is that making it a career means being more than an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where kind of working on a lot of that stuff kind of came in. And it wasn't until I started prioritizing the non-sport parts of the job that I kind of started to at least feel like that path was possible. You know, I think I might not ever get there. It's hard, and I don't really know what I'm doing because no one's done it before. But I do think it's possible. It's just I don't know what it looks like yet.
Yeah, that's an important takeaway from a lot of people hoping to be a professional strongman, strongwoman. Because like as a promoter and an athlete myself, I understand both aspects of it, and I'm trying to do my best now to bring the sport into a way that the athletes are treated like professional athletes, like in NFL or NHL or so, where they can do just the sport and they don't need to worry about any other job. But it requires the athletes to be those professional athletes for me to be able to do that for them.
Yeah.
Because if they're not up to par, then there's nothing to go off of there.
I think a lot of like women in weight class athletes kind of look at the open men and be like, oh, it must be nice. Like so much easier for them. It is like there's more opportunities. But if you look at like the open men that are really making like great livings and great careers, I think like, Mitch Hooper, Brian Shaw, Eddie Hall, like people that are really big names and are making big money in the sport. Like they're more than just athletes. Like they've put work into like developing their personal brand, like their social media, like building businesses. Like they've all done more than just be the best athletes.
90% of their posts are not lifting related.
Yeah. And so like, I think that's a valuable lesson. It's like even the top men have to work hard at these other skills doing like Mitch Hooper's YouTube channel. He puts so much work into that. And like these other aspects of the job that other athletes want to complain about having to do, like, the top men are also having to do it. Like it is part of the job at every level for both genders.
Yeah. And let's be honest, even the funny videos, the memes and so on, I see them, I'm like, that's great. I have a great idea. You come to the gym and I'm not bothered to do that. Or I'm not bothered to record that or edit that. They're like, there's a lot of work that goes into that past the 7 seconds that you see on Instagram of the final product. So
the sport can give you the eyeballs, but what you do with the eyeballs is completely different.
Yeah, I remember it's almost verbatim. A post that I saw that really kind of changed my mindset was Dana Lynn Bailey. She posted something about how her Olympia win. I think she's saying that she won like 10 grand, which in the grand scheme of things for winning the Olympia might not even cover the cost of doing it. and how she expected her life to change and it didn't. And she kind of posted about that. And Rob, I saw comments on it. Winning gives you the platform, but it's still up to you what to do with that. And I remember reading that, and like that was like a light bulb moment for me. Like, yeah, like that, like winning gives you a platform, but it's not everything. Like you still have to keep that momentum and do more work afterwards.
Well, if the end goal of the whole thing is the sports help change both your lives, right? So the ultimate goal of whatever businesses you're in is to try to get people to have that same experience. If it's through the sport or through any other strength sport, that's what it is. You know, so the net positive of that, you know, is good, right? So the more eyeballs is good. And how you go about monetizing, it can go different ways. You know, it can be the coaching, it can be promoting, it can be whatever it's going to be. You know, everybody's tried a multitude of different ways. But at the end of the day, that's who the customer, you know, is that demographic. Dave Tate here from Elite FTS to talk to you about bands. We've been a supplier of bands for almost 2 decades now. So I've known my way around the band landscape. When I'm talking about bands, I'm talking about floss bands, long bands, short bands, bands you can use for resistance training, mobility training, body weight training, and flossing. One of our most popular bands, or actually our most popular bands, are the long bands. The long bands are typically used the most with squats, bench presses. Our floss bands are bands that you wrap around the joint to be able to help with mobility, circulation. And the short bands are designed for shorter range movements, bench press, deadlifts, and a lot of times people will use them with resistance machines to help accommodate the strength resistance curve. Head over to elitefts.com and look for bands in the toolbar or blowout menu. You know, unless you're trying to sling something that doesn't fit that demographic, then I'd wonder, like, maybe you need to do a different spot. Yeah, maybe you need different eyeballs to be able to attract the other eyeballs. You know, so with what you're doing, are you trying to expand the training side, or are you still trying to figure that out, the coaching side?
I'm trying to figure it out. I love coaching. I, in my perfect world, wouldn't want it to be like my full-time job. Like, I love coaching. I prefer to coach a small group of people that I can be like really invested in. And I think that's the thing I have a hard time with making, like, you know, online coaching as a career. It's like the number of people that I would need to work with to make like a really good living is more than I feel like I can give the attention that I want to. So I would love to get to a point where I'm making at least enough as an athlete to just kind of work with a small group of people that I can be like really invested in. Because I do love coaching. But I would prefer most of my income to come from, you know, being an athlete and sponsorships and social media or like whatever that is, because that just gives more flexibility to my life.
Which goes back to the media trained, you know, personality promotion and all those other aspects. Because unless the sport radically changes, the prize money is probably not going to get it there.
No, and also the reality is, like, the prize money is for the open shows, and I know that I'm a phenomenal athlete, but I'm 5'6". Like, people tell me that I'm being like pessimistic or negative about it, but like the reality is, I'm most likely never going to win the Arnold or the Rogue Invitational. Nothing's impossible, but just being a weight class athlete in a field of giants at a show that's very like caters to the big girls, my chances of winning significant prize money when open shows are the only opportunities is also slim. It'd be different if there was like a Rogue Invitational for the 73 kilo class. I think I could absolutely make a living off prize money, but it's just not there yet. And I think it's going to be a long time, if ever, for it to get to that point for like the weight classes.
From the training side, because we talked a little bit about that, kind of circled back to that. What were some of the things that you did earlier that were just stupid that you wouldn't repeat or you wouldn't advise other athletes to do?
Well, I think early on, like, good and bad. I think I trained like a bodybuilder a lot at first. It was just like high volume, high reps. I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, let's just get in and do a million reps of everything. So I'm like, I just wanted to get in and work hard. when I first started, I guess I didn't really understand that like just going in and working as hard as you can isn't always productive. Like there's periodization and there's like things like deloads and like recovery and like progression that has to be built in that like
PR every week.
No, and I think a lot of people kind of start like that. You have those beginner gains and it's easy to do. I think some benefits, kind of training like a bodybuilder and like high reps and training kind of stupid. I think because of that, like my like tendon strength and health is really high because I was just reps. I think there are things that came of that were positive. I also got hurt really early in my career because I didn't know what I was doing. I was making it up. I didn't really have anyone formally teach me how to like deadlift or do any of that stuff. And I hurt my back like my first year doing Strongman, I think. And that was avoidable if I had learned how to do things right at the beginning. But it's also probably one of the best things that happened to me because it did force me to kind of start over and
that's the conundrum, right?
Actually learn how to do things right.
Yeah, because when you look back on all the stupid shit, if you learned from it, it's kind of how you got to where you were.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it becomes a conundrum when you're seeing other people do it because you got to ask, do we just let this unfold? It's the way we all know it's going to unfold, or do we intervene? And it's a tough call.
It is. It's a learning experience. I think it's worth intervening if it's someone who's actually willing to listen and like trust the process. But I think that's kind of hard to find. That young people, I think if you try to talk to them about some of this stuff, a lot of them, yeah, right. Like
oftentimes
I'll be
the
fine.
hard way.
Yeah. It's
unfortunately.
Yeah. It's a hard lesson that a lot of people end up having to learn.
Do you find that, because you've been in the sport for a long time, do you find that the younger women that are coming in will listen, or are they still going to be head down and have to learn the hard way with everything?
For the most part, yeah. Women listen a lot better than men do. Men are a little more challenging usually with wanting to like, I think men more often will be that like their first consult ever, they just started doing Strongman. I want to do World's Strongest Man. Like, okay, let's talk about what the steps are in between. Like what can we do over the next year or two? Because like you're not making it to World's Strongest Man next year. I think it's men that are more likely like, yeah, I'm ready to like jump into like everything 100% right now. And women are a little bit more like, tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think that they understand all the technical aspects that play into this. No. So when you get to the granular level, what are some of the technical aspects that they may not be considering? I kind of talked about tacky earlier, but when you get into all those things, what are some of the things that they have no clue about?
Especially the technical aspects.
Yeah.
Like just the technical aspects of the sport, like things like taking the time to learn how to Olympic weightlift, like stuff like that just can't happen fast. Like that just takes time. That a lot of times people want to be good right now. Mm-hmm. Like it's really hard to talk to someone and be like, are you okay with working toward something in 2 or 3 years? And like those are my favorite clients to work with. Like I have got one guy who just did nationals last year, and he was like, you know what, I'm ready to work, and I think if we work really hard, I can come back and win in 2 to 3 years. I'm like, I love that mentality because like that's how long it takes sometimes. Like if you're trying to learn like brand new skills, if you're trying to put on body weight, if you're like, there's things that just take time. And in general, I find that women are more patient about that than men who are like, I want to do a show in 12 weeks.
Well, the interesting thing with that to me is time goes faster than what people think. Mm-hmm. And I can just simply ask, do we all remember when the world locked down and say that was like 5 years ago?
Yeah.
How long ago?
You see what I'm saying? So what's 3 years if we can all remember that? Mm-hmm. And it's like, holy shit, that was like 18 months ago?
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really not.
Yeah.
And I think I remember looking through like a lot of like the top men in the sport, and there's anomalies everywhere, but it seems like most people kind of hit their peak about 10 years in to training. And not everyone sees that whole process. So I think they see people that kind of like seem to come out of nowhere, and they have a warped sense of how long it takes to achieve some of these things. But like, it can take like a decade to get to some of these.
Funny enough, 8 years into training Strongman specifically, I'm finally realizing things now that I could have been doing all the way from the start. I'm like, well, this is like so straightforward and simple. How did I not know about it for 8 years? And like even like you bring up the Olympic lifting, I've done a year of training specifically just that before I ever started Strongman.
Really?
And it was great to see that once I got into Strongman, how much that actually contributed to it.
It helps
Especially just
so
the
much.
overhead press, like the technique, the focus on the technique, and the patience with it. Yeah.
I wonder now with social media being around as long as it has been, you can probably go back on a lot of timelines on people and see how long it's actually been. Right? Because
Yeah,
Instagram's been around. Yeah, I'm trying to think of how long Instagram's been around, but quite a while.
Does that? Like, that's the problem with a lot of this.
No, but they
I
should.
disagree with the format of, let's say, Instagram, because everything is so fleeting. Most people, they'll click on someone's profile, they'll see the top 5-6 posts, and that's about it. But some people have years, decades almost of information out there, maybe even before Instagram, that could be out there and that nobody even pays attention to, which was funny. Like last week I posted the video on the elitefts of the deadlifts. We did something for fun with bands, and I lifted against that.
I saw that.
One of the comments was,
12 band.
yeah, like one of the comments was, "Oh, that's not what gets you to a big deadlift. You know, put in the work." And I'm like, buddy, I've been doing this for like over 10 years altogether now. Like, yes, this isn't what did this, but first of all, I'm having fun.
Yeah.
You know, let's not forget about having fun. And second of all, like, this is just another thing that I'm doing. Like, don't forget the 10 years of stuff that I've already done to be here where I'm at. So.
It's a fun thing to do, because I'll do it with some podcast guests where you go there and just, I mean, your thumb gets tired, you know, scrolling all the way down, but there's years of stuff. You know, inevitably there's always that starting point where, say you're 180 pounds, you know, and
never that long.
Well,
but
you go back, you go back far enough, and a lot of things can be realized. One can be, they didn't start where you think, and some of them started at a way lower position than the person who's looking is currently at.
Yeah.
You know, which a lot of people will talk themselves out of things like, well, I can never do that. Right. And like, well, you realize a lot of people that are doing that,
like, no one's starting position looked great.
Exactly.
For the most part. Like, I think my Instagram started before I started liftings, but you can like scroll back to my first powerlifting meet that I did it in the 132 class and like see how terrible it looked. And I think that's valuable for people to see. Like, everyone, I know it's cliche, but everyone starts somewhere, and a lot of people's somewhere is probably worse than you think.
My Strongman career started from when the doctor said I'll never lift heavy ever again.
Really?
Like, no more than a suitcase worth per hand, and that's the limit. So here I am, I guess.
I think he was wrong.
A little bit, maybe. Yeah. Sometimes I keep considering going back to see him and like just showing him a lift or a video or a newspaper article just to say, you know, do you really believe what you said, or were you trying to like rub it in and like make?
Well, of course, they're gonna say, well, no, I knew this would motivate you, you know, so that's why I said it.
How long ago was that?
9 years now. Yeah.
Did you have any questions for her that I didn't bring up that are more Strongman related?
Yeah.
Do you mind if we bathroom break real quick? Come back to those?
Yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Thank you.
I forgot to tell her about the coaster.
Oh, yes. I was just thinking that. Yeah.
Guess I'll use the bathroom, man.
Hey.
We have about 30 minutes left till the 2 hour.
Okay.
Perfect.
Were you getting supposed to wrap it up? It sounded like you were about to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
A
A lot of good things covered.
Oh, yeah. I like the mental health aspect.
Yeah.
I heard that from that kind of industry, like Strongman and all that stuff. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's getting a lot more popular. That's why I was happy to bring up that question with her.
Got some stuff.
Yeah, that the headset's falling apart.
I can try and find another one.
Oh, it's fine. I mean, we're almost done.
Oh, there you go. Pretty.
Yeah, where's my personal fluffer?
See you this weekend.
Yeah, you're at. You'll be on Saturday.
I'll be here Saturday and Sunday.
Sweet. Lily's got her big squats this weekend.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be here to help.
Yeah, I've got a Strongman or two coming in Saturday, Sunday. I think. Yeah, I asked Lily to put them on the list for you. I invited Ed Cohen to come out, but he's not even coming to the Arnold. He's like, I don't want to see anyone.
That's interesting, but okay.
Well, he gets nothing out of it really, other than having to forcefully socialize with people.
Fair.
So like, I totally get it. It just
Amber sent me a
Told him to come
text
down.
last night saying it costs like $150 to get into this thing.
I was gonna go today.
It's like
Or
50.
tomorrow. It's 50 a person.
Fridays,
So-
yeah. Sundays like 35 or 40. But like, yeah, that's why I asked you if there's any passes. Just like letting them like the
Holy
elite.
shit.
Yeah, I'm not going because I was gonna go get tomorrow, but like I saw it was $50 a person. I'm like, that's $100 for me and my wife just to get in.
Yep.
Yeah.
That doesn't include if I want to buy anything or, yeah.
Talking about the outrageous ticket prices.
Yeah.
I remember it was like $25 to get in.
Yeah.
I used to pay like $100 for the whole thing and the bodybuilding show.
Yeah.
Oh, for the
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it seems a lot more disorganized because they didn't even have a vendor list out yet.
Oh, they didn't.
Which-
I didn't even look.
They usually have that months out. They didn't even have a. Forget a map. They don't have a vendor list.
it was posted somewhere, but it was posted somewhere like really obscure because I know a friend of mine found it, but they had to like dig for
But
it.
yeah, it's,
Like, so why is it that
That's not
hard?
nice. Yeah, I did. I looked it up last night. It was like $50 for Friday. I was like, yeah, I'm doing it.
Mhm.
For a Strongman ticket is $385.
Whoa.
Yeah.
For the Strongman?
Yeah.
Just for the show. That's a silver. That's not gold or platinum.
So that's the other thing is then you have to pay to get into the Strongman show on top of it. I'm like, this just isn't worth it.
Yeah, because they started setting it up where you get into the Strongman show from the outside and you don't go through the expo. So if you
Oh.
want to go to the expo, you have to buy a separate ticket for the expo, which
I'm glad they are getting such an audience and so many
is cool.
eyeballs.
But
But
it's also like they sold out last year, so it's like
Yeah.
if you can charge that much, but
Mm-hmm.
you're selling out, like
And what are you doing for new people who've never seen it before? And they're like, oh, that's kind of cool.
never mind. It's $300.
Yeah, right. Like, just $50 you can find out if you like it or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Y'all enjoy. Have a good
Yeah, man. Have a good one. See you in the weekend.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna resume in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Got it. Okay, so we're back. So what's on the horizon out after the Arnold?
it really depends on how the Arnold goes. I think the rest of my year is really dependent on how this show goes because I'm kind of at a point of deciding whether to stay in the open class or drop down or the ultimate goal is to get a Rogue Invitational invite. I love the Arnold. The Rogue Invitational is my shit. Like the types of events that they pick for that, like I feel like that's my show to shine at. So for me, like the ultimate goal of doing the Arnold is to get that invite. So the rest of my year kind of depends on how I do at this show and whether I feel like I've done enough to feel confident in getting that. But like those don't go out until later in the year. So it kind of depends if I, don't do as well as I want at the Arnold and then feel like I need to do another show between, now and then.
What are the differences between the Arnold and the Rogue Invitational as far as the
I
events?
think this year is actually a little bit different, but the Arnold, I feel like traditionally tends to be more like kind of static, heavy, like big, like sturdy girl events. Rogue Invitational is kind of CrossFit-esque, like, it is with, the CrossFit show and like they're strongman events, but they're, I think,
A lot more speed and endurance.
a lot more athletic, more skill. This past year, like there were 6 events, but there were 12 different disciplines within those 6 events because they were like medleys and like it's just more going on. It's
Interesting enough, you don't even start at the implement most of the time. You have to run to the implement. So
Yeah.
if you're
a lot of them is like you
lighter,
run to
could
the
just-
implement and then you have
yeah.
to like run and hit a buzzer and there's just it's more like speed and athleticism and like I think those are the areas that I shine more in the sport. And so like that's really the show that I want to get to.
And when is that?
It was in November last year. I think it's November again this year. So end of the year.
Yeah. So that's a quick turnaround for those that do that and then do the Arnold as well,
Yeah.
right? Because I think the World's Strongest Man is a quick turnaround from the Arnold too, right?
Mhm.
Oh, it's happening in month,
Yeah.
half after, yeah.
Yeah, so that's boom, but that's like
Yeah.
so for the men that's like 3 real quick.
Yeah.
That's a peaking challenge.
But then with the SCL, the whole way we structure the league is we compete once or twice a month, oftentimes. So, and then the guys also compete at the Giants Live or the Arnolds and so on. So there's a lot of competition going on together.
I've always wondered when you're like these guys are competing like every other week. Like are they training specifically for each show or is it just kind of be well rounded and then jump in and treat it like an event day?
That's where a lot of the training and endurance of the sport comes in, where you are generally very well rounded and you start treating the competitions as a max training day, essentially. So if you focus your recovery and the rest of the training around it, then it just becomes like a regular gym week, essentially.
I
To some
think
degree.
I think it's cool because it starts to favor well-rounded athletes and it starts to favor veteran athletes that like
Oh, yeah.
if you just have that foundation of skills, you can kind of jump into things. And that's something that I look back on my career, like years ago, I would have never jumped into a show without being like perfectly prepared and like a 12-week peaking cycle for it. And now like the last year or two, like there's some shows that I've jumped into like a week or two before, and I was like, it'd be fun to jump into. And it's like, once you've done the sport long enough and you're generally strong and you have experience with all the events, you can kind of jump into things more because you have the experience and you don't necessarily need to have been training that event for 12 weeks to figure it out.
And
that's
start
kind of
seeing
cool.
the athletes that are technically perfect. Everything they do is meticulously precise. There's no wasted movement. And you're wondering how they're so fast. They're not the strongest or the fastest, but everything they do is so spot on that they're just getting 2-3 seconds here and there on everything they're doing, especially when they've been doing it for 10 plus years and they're still dominating and placing podium. That's a really impressive part of it to see.
I would say that probably helps too with the turnaround between shows. If you're a more like technical athlete versus someone who's like grinding through lifts, it would be a lot easier to turn around and compete again 2 weeks later. It seems like that would be easier to recover from than people that are like muscling everything.
Definitely.
So.
And I honestly find it a little bit more fair towards the end when we have the finals that you actually see who the strongest guy is after he's done 8+ competitions in the summer, not just getting ready for half the year for one competition.
Yeah.
Plus, they don't know the events until 1-2 weeks out. So you just have to be good.
How much do you see injuries happening?
Very rarely.
Really?
That's the point. So we do not max out on events. It won't be very few times we'll have a event that's focused on a record breaking setup. So it'll be the heaviest deadlift or so on. Most of the time, knowing how frequent we have to compete, we're trying to push the bar on what's acceptable and possible for most athletes. You know, the golden thirds split where a third of the athletes will get multiple reps on an implement, a third of them will get 1 rep maybe or struggle a little bit, and then a third might not even get a single rep. And it looks good on camera. It looks good.
It's cool to hear. I feel like that's like a general rule of all promoters, like the rule of thirds.
Yeah, it works out really well. There's a reason it's successful, especially on camera and for the audience, because everyone wants to cheer and see like the little bit of disappointment that the athlete didn't get it, but you still cheer for him for the effort that he's putting in. And then you see, this guy did 1 rep, this is cool, like somebody can do it. And then you have the 2 guys that step out and have a rep battle for the 5 reps, and you're like, this is insane. Like, how is this happening? I
think there's an art to picking the weights that are gonna work for that.
But to set that up, you have to set those weights that will not injure people, or like safety of the equipment goes a long way. We will triple check, make sure that to our best ability nobody gets hurt, because these are our professional athletes. They're not just a guy that came in from nowhere that wants to compete and show off how good he is. He's a professional athlete that we need to take care of, because in 3 weeks he's on at the next show. 3 weeks after that he's on another show. In a month after that he's at Giants Live or somewhere else, where if we hurt him, they're going to be upset at us. If he's hurt at another competition, he'll either not, or others or him might not want to do that competition in favor of doing somewhere where he's not being constantly hurt or destroyed. So there's a big part to that.
I'm curious, as a promoter, how far out do you think we are from like women having something like that, if ever?
I really want to. I'm not going to announce any big plans, but that is something I'm hoping to push a little bit.
Like, do you think that there is enough demand and interest for that to happen?
I honestly believe that there is. Especially with the way the women are putting in the amount of effort into good performances, into the good athletic concept of like how strong they are, pushing the records, wanting to push the records, not being afraid of pushing records or numbers or competing or showing how amazing they are. It really helps attract an audience for that. So I really think there's definitely starting to be a enough of a demand for this that we could do that soon. I look forward to it. Yeah, so
that kind of stuff looks fun. It's funny because it's so out of line. It's like you asked me, like, I prefer to compete twice a year, but I think part of that is because the shows are really heavy, they're really taxing, they're hard to recover from. So like it feels like I need that much time, as opposed to something like that where it's actually thought about. Like, you consider the fact that people are going to be competing again in 2 weeks, and that's taken into consideration. Like it just sounds fun. Like
It is.
like
It is.
like a little like strongman comp tour.
Most of the guys that come on our shows, they want to be there. Like, they will fight for the place to come to our competitions. We have a whole list of people that want to get invite, and I want to make a more proper path of qualifiers for them, especially for the US guys that don't have anything of this available. We have 3 shows in Europe now that are qualifiers for SEL, so we're hitting that path, but there's nothing yet for the US, and hopefully with the years that will be something we work on. But especially for the women, there are so many great ones that do not participate or can't participate at that level of the opens, but would have a perfect spot in a league that they can show off their endurance in.
Yeah, because I feel like something like that, just by nature, has to be a little bit more like athletic and conditioning based. Because, like you said, you can't just be maxing lifts every other week.
Impossible.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So how can people go about finding you?
Instagram is the best way. I'm sure you'll link that somewhere, but I'm most active on Instagram. That's the easiest place to find me. I'm also on TikTok, but Instagram is kind of where the easiest place to get a hold of me. So.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming out. Ilya, thanks for the co-chair, and we're done.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
All content you see on this channel and at elitefts.com is created by, take a guess, Elite FTS. If you want to help support the content, head over to elitefts.com and pick up literally anything that you need to be able to get more jacked and strong.